There are over 500,000 kids in foster care across the United States, and making sure they're well taken care of takes a village. I'm Erin Lindstrom, and this is Foster Care Aware, a production brought to you by Tidewater Friends of Foster Care with support from the Barry Robinson Center. If you've had it on your heart to become a foster parent, volunteer, donor, advocate, or just want to learn more, you're in the right place. For more information on how to move forward, head to fostercareaware.org/next steps. And now I'm thrilled to share today's segment with you. Hey, I am Erin Lindstrom, the co-host of Foster Care Aware. I've been co-hosting Foster Care Aware with Audra through a series of events. We were connected. I signed up as a holiday drive volunteer sponsor for Tidewater Friends of Foster Care a couple years ago. And ended up getting to know Audra and becoming more and more part of an organization and working with her to develop the village and now Foster Care Aware. And the truth is, I have been interested in foster care and adoption and really just what's happening with the most vulnerable children in our community since I was a child. I was naturally curious, and I would constantly ask my mom questions about adoption and where were kids that couldn't be with their families and what was happening to them. And I remember when we first got the internet and we had America Online, I would go online and look up kids that were available for adoption and send them to my mom. And eventually she was like, Erin, please stop. I'm a single mom. Like, I do not have the capacity for this. And it's so sad, but I could not let it go. So it's kind of always been something that's on my mind and just been on my heart, which kind of brings me here today. So I want to share with you a little bit because I've been here, I've been having the conversations, and I realize I haven't really introduced myself. So I want to tell you a little bit about me, how I got here, and then we're going to hop into a pretty cool training today that is meant to help you make decisions going forward to kind of bring mindfulness into your own life. And in turn, if you are parenting, whether it's biological, foster, or adoptive, this will turn into some conscious parenting techniques as well. So let's see. So as I was saying, I was pretty curious, right? Just as a kid. And so my academic path, I was basically determined to figure out, like, how do we eradicate poverty to make sure that there were no kids in poverty, right? And I was pretty sure that education was the answer. So I ended up creating a degree that I don't think anyone else had ever done before at Northeastern. And I studied international affairs and elementary education. And what I've learned from, over the last 15 years is that while education is so important, not fighting that at all, it's so important, but what's actually a little bit more important is love and connection. That's really the magic of education. Usually connection is in there. So sometimes when the home is unstable, stability is found in the classrooms, and connection is made with the teachers. And that's why, aside from reading and learning and getting those valuable skills to move on to have life as a successful adult, there's also room for connection there. And I think that's really the most important thing. So after I graduated from college, I started a master's degree in nonprofit management, and I ended up walking away from that to pursue coach training and to start my own business. And while my life had a whole bunch of twists and turns of its own, where I find myself now is still running that business and also helping out in the nonprofit sector from a strategic perspective, as well as a volunteer and as an advocate. What I find really interesting is that in all of my coaching, everything seems to boil back down to building trust, communicating consciously, and healing in relationships. And so much of that carries over into the world of foster care. And so if you've been listening to the sessions in Foster Care Aware, we've been hearing this time and time again from different experts. So if you listen to John will be here talking about trauma in the brain, and Mary McGowan was here talking about attachment, and LaCora talks about the building relationships between families and really holding space for everyone going through the process. It all comes back to relationships. So when a child enters your home, or anyone's home, right, for that matter, there's a healing opportunity there. And Audra and I have decided to launch the Prospective Parent Program to really start offering a perspective of the healing process, and give people who are interested in walking that journey some mindset tools to help them, not just as parents, but even as just humans, navigating life and making, challenging decisions. Because deciding to be a foster parent is not a light decision, right? A lot does change when you say yes. And there is a lot of opportunity for amazingness and love and connection. And there's also opportunity for pain there. And there's opportunities to discover things about yourself and to walk down a path where you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So what we want to do is arm people with the mindset tools to navigate that path, which, while it is a unique path, it's also, these are the tools of life and navigating changes and just figuring things out as we go. So I'm going to be talking today about mindfulness in regards to making a decision, with the understanding that the more you do this as an adult, the more your children will too. So if you are parenting, whether it's foster, bio, adoptive, kinship, you really are setting an example here because kids listen to everything, right? And so the way you talk to yourself and the way you're kind of holding yourself through different challenges, your kids see that and will emulate that. And so I would love to give you some tools to kind of extend grace to yourself. That way you showcase that to your children and they do the same thing. My daughter, I have two kids. My daughter is 7 and my son is 5.5. And I have a blended family. I'm divorced. And so they go back and forth and they experience co-parenting. And it's very interesting when they play house, right? Or they're playing with their dolls. I can actually get a glimpse into what they've learned from me, because that's how their dolls like parent, right? So it's really, really interesting. And they are sponges and they're always taking that in. So even when a child doesn't seem like it, if they're having a hissy fit, they're still learning from you in every moment of the drama and the trauma. So a lot of times holding space and giving grace and all that stuff, it's easier to do this for others. But that's one of the beautiful things, because that's the healing that happens in relationships, is as you do that for others, you start to see how you can change the way you're being with yourself. And, it's just, I think this is really like a magical part of being in a relationship with other people and seeing what's there. And when you're mindful, when you're being aware and just kind of curious about what's happening and why are you behaving this way, and just kind of becoming an observer of both your thoughts and your actions, that is powerful, because you really start to get this zoomed out perspective on a situation. And then you can start to really make decisions powerfully about how you're interacting. And again, that's what changes everything. So there are 3 things I want to cover today, and I'll just tell you what they are now so then you can settle in and listen. The first one is about awareness and ownership. The second one is about meeting uneasiness with calmness. And the third one is about adopting the mindset of everyone's doing their best. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how to do these things, how it connects to parenting, and then how we can kind of take this all together to powerfully create our lives. So let's dig in, shall we? The first one is ownership and awareness. And so the first thing, again, I'm going to be talking a little bit in the context of decision making here. The first thing you can do to mindfully make a decision is to be aware of the fact that you're considering something. So you can own that this is something you're considering. If you're thinking about fostering, you can just start to own, like, yes, I am considering this. And here's why that's important, because if you're not doing that, but you are considering this, but you haven't kind of owned that fact yet, it sounds like, I don't know, maybe one day, or, oh my God, I wish I could, but I can never. And neither of those perspectives, right? They're kind of like, they're unclear because they're opinionated and they're formed in feelings. So if you want to make a powerful decision, you want to do so from a space of personal power. So it's totally okay to be unsure, but instead of feeling powerless about it, which is like, oh, it's such a big decision, it's too hard for me to even consider. The first thing you can do is just decide, I am considering this. And it changes your energy. It completely changes the energy of what's happening. And when you go to share with someone that you're considering this, they interact with you differently. So if you tell someone you care about, oh, I really don't know, then they're going to meet you in that uncertainty or like play to their side because they're going to try to protect you. So they're going to be like, yeah, definitely not because of this. When you say, I'm considering this, then you're creating an environment for people to bring you facts to consider versus everyone just sharing their feelings. So just something to consider. Here's a mirror of how this may show up with kids. Back when it was safe to go to Target, I brought my daughter to the store and decided to let her pick out a toy that day. I think maybe it was around her birthday. I can't really recall. But it was so hard for her to decide. She stood there looking at all of the toys, and I could see her, you know, when you're trying to make a decision and it's just so uncomfortable, and she was getting emotional. She was feeling bad that she was taking so long. So she was like beating herself up over the decision, but she was also frustrated because she really couldn't decide and she didn't know what was the best choice. And she was trying to make this decision, but she just couldn't get there. And so I can see the meltdown beginning to start, right? And I think we've all felt this too, which is interesting and human. Like this, feelings are a human thing. So what I did was I kind of like kneeled down, bent to her level, right? So I'm meeting her. And I said something along the lines of like, hey, I can see that making this decision is hard. Like, it's okay. We're not in a rush. I'm here. Let me know how I can support you. And by doing that, she took a deep breath and then she could make a decision based on what was right for her instead of from those reactionary feelings. Having that moment of awareness of just like, hey, I see that this is happening. I can see that you're stressed. It really allowed her to have this minute of ownership where the power was taken away from the indecision and given back to her, right? So now she's in power of choosing instead of at the will of her feelings, right? And now she was probably 6 at the time. So like, this is a little child. She has no idea what has just happened, but as a parent, that is one of the ways where we get to instill mindfulness in our kids, is just by being how we want their inner voice to sound. So by getting down on her level and just kind of giving her space, like that informs her of like, oh, this is a way I can make decisions. This, you know, we're speaking to her subconscious at that point that is going to copy and paste the way we're handling the situation. And that's how she's going to handle it forward. So I think that's a really cool way to kind of like get in there. And it's the same way that I think a lot of us would like to be treated as adults. Like if someone sees me really having a hard time with this decision, the most supportive thing would be for someone to come say, hey, it looks like you're really like having a moment with this decision. Like, just want you to know, like, this is totally human to be going back and forth. I'm here. Let me know how I can support you. Right? Because now we're aware of the fact, like it gives us that moment of zooming out to see, oh, I'm in a back and forth. We are in a decision-making process. And like, I am in charge of this. Like I am not my feelings. I am having feelings. And that is a huge differentiator and such a good mindfulness moment. So the second thing is meeting uneasiness with calmness. So in that example, right, I got down on her level and I was namaste mom, which doesn't happen all the time, by the way. And this isn't about being perfect by any means. This is just about practicing this and showing up as much as you can with that open-heartedness and sort of noticing when you're not. It's really not about being perfect all the time. So let's talk about the uneasiness for a minute. When we're making a big decision, there can be a lot of feelings to sort through, as we just talked about. So one thing you can do when this is happening, and this is kind of shifting back to if you're considering being a parent, I would suggest taking them, write them down. And this can be about any decision or anything that you're kind of throwing around in your mind. Because as you write them down, brain dump them all, and then you can go through them and you can actually identify, this is a thought, this is a feeling, this is a question, and you can cross the irrational fears off the list. Like you can ask yourself, is this really going to happen? Is this something I need to be worried about? And some of them may not know, and that's fine because now you've identified a question you have. And when you have the question, next we can find someone to ask it to, right? So once you know what you're worried about, now we get to either address the concerns by ourselves, maybe with a partner, if this is like a relationship thing. When you see what your worries are, you'll know the next step of how to deal with them, right? And then the third thing, right? So yourself, a partner, or someone like who's in close relationship with you, or an expert who can share information with you. Most of the time, when we cannot decide something, it's because we don't have enough information. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be on Google for 12 hours trying to figure it out. It means you need a meaningful conversation with someone you trust to figure it out. And someone who can be mindful with you, right? And not necessarily tell you how to feel or convince you one way or another, but hold space for you in your decision-making process. So how does this match up with parenting? When kids are freaking out, right? We want to do the same thing. We want to meet the uneasiness and the like, vibes with calmness as much as we can. Again, we're human, so it's normal for us to react. But the more you practice this, the more you can come to it with the calmness versus the reactivity. So by being in the calm energy and holding space, kids can frequently meet you there. It might take a minute, but they will meet you there. If you sit down with a screaming child, they're more likely to eventually calm down and talk to you than you meeting a screaming child with screaming, right? Because that's just creating more and more chaos. So as the adult, you can slowly guide them through the process of sorting their thoughts and feelings the same way we just talked about you doing with like a list, right? So you can ask them questions. And I want to say too that I think it's very important to ask first permission to even ask them questions, because you want this to be a consensual process where you're building trust and they feel safe. So I tend to do this with my kids sometimes. I'll say, hey, it seems like you're upset. And they'll say, yeah, like obviously, right? But starting with that easy answer, like kind of gets me in the door, right? And then I'll be like, okay, may I ask you a question? And they might say no, and they might say yes. And when they say no, a lot of times later, they'll come back and say, what's your question? Because they're curious too, right? So I'll be like, let's say they say yes to me asking a question. Then I'll be like, okay, are you mad because your tower fell over or whatever you're observing, right? And then you kind of like, you want to acknowledge their feeling and be like, oh, I totally get it. That's so frustrating. I can see how that would be frustrating. I have some ideas about how we could rebuild it. May I share them? And they'll say yes or no. And now you're solution focused and you've got there together. And that's really what you want to do, is build that bridge with them versus jumping to the solution, because you want to show them how to do it. And again, this is like mindful communication, where through your communication, you're teaching them how to problem solve and how to treat themselves internally. So it's powerful. The key here is to be curious about their feelings and to really ask questions. And if they don't give you consent to ask questions, then don't ask questions. And I think that's really important, is this is a co-creation. And sometimes the most helpful thing is for you to just be silent and respect their wishes. And that way, when they have calmed down, they can talk to you because that trust hasn't been broken or violated or anything. Now, I want to say too that I am sharing from personal experience here and sharing from my training, and different people have different opinions on this. So you will have to find out and try some different things and feel what's right for you, and know that there's tons of different trainings around mindfulness parenting, and you can take the pieces of what I'm saying and apply it and take what you want, leave the rest, okay? In no way is this a one size fits all, but there are some overarching things that you're welcome to try and see how it goes. Okay, so the next thing, the third thing, is adopting the mindset of we're all doing our best, right? And, you know, I think there's a lot of truth in paradoxes. And one thing that is true is kind of that, like, we know nothing. We may know a lot of things, and at the same time, we know nothing. We don't know what's going to happen. Right now it's 2020, and I don't think anyone could have really predicted how life is right now. And that's just because we don't know what's going to happen next. And that's kind of always the truth, but there are moments in time where we're reminded of this. And, you know, COVID-19 is one of these moments. And I think when kids are entering foster care, they're living in a moment like this where they don't know what's happening next. Mary McGowan said something really interesting in her second segment with us, where she said something along the lines of, close your eyes Imagine yourself in your living room. You're watching TV with your family. There's a knock at the door. A couple people come in and they say, you're coming with us. And then they take you to a different home, put you with another family and say, we don't know, but like there's no more information about what's happening next. That's the reality for many children in foster care. They don't know what's happening next. So this is their state. So the discomfort that we may be feeling right now, living in a world with uncertainty, that is their world as well. So just kind of having that perspective, and definitely check out Mary's segment if you haven't yet, because I feel like that was such an important shift in way of looking at things. And it really, like, that's perspective shift. That's mindfulness, is being aware of the situation, right? So, because we don't always know what's going to happen, we don't necessarily know what the best choice is, right? We don't know how everything is going to play out. Like, all we can do is do our best to honor what we feel is right and figure it out as we go. And by doing this over and over, that's how we as adults build self-trust and resiliency. We're figuring it out, and then and we're still here today. So we can look back and we just have this long line of times I figured it out and I'm still here. I'm still figuring it out, right? I'm trusting, I'm going, I'm moving forward and doing my best. So when it comes to kids, they have moments of being unaware of this and moments of being aware, right? And the more you start to ground into the fact that we don't know, but we're doing our best and we're here to figure it out, the more you can say that to them with certainty. Because we can't be certain of the outcome, but we can be certain of the process of, yep, we just keep moving forward. Yep, we're figuring it out, right? And this is kind of the message that all kids need, is that it's safe to have feelings, that we're here no matter what, we've got your back, and that you're not asking them to be perfect. You're just asking them to show up, right? Try their best, and that you'll have their back no matter what their best looks like that day. The other piece of this is remembering that all of us as humans are trying our best. And when we can come back to that, we can give grace to everyone and remember that at the end of the day, we're all on the same team, right? We all want our children to be cared for, and we're all trying to figure it out along the way. And this mindset is especially important, right, in foster care, because we are working as part of a team. We have social workers, foster parents, biological parents, we have the court system, the CASA, there's doctors, there's teachers, right? And everyone is kind of gathering around these kids to help them do their best. And all of the opinions won't always match up. And all of the actions, we might not always agree with what everyone is deciding and how everyone is acting. But if we can maintain the idea and the perspective that I might not understand this, but I know from their perspective, they're trying their best, they're doing their best, they're showing up, then that gives us a different level of grace that we can continue forward with. And that's really what kids need to see too, especially when, as foster parents, right? If you were considering this, again, as foster parents, you need to be able to hold space for this child who loves their parents unconditionally, regardless of what happened and what got them into foster care, right? And that can be a big ask for someone, because we're adults and we're judgy. And that's part of what keeps us safe, is making judgments. So it's not a bad thing that we're judgy, and we have to kind of keep our hearts and minds open for the child in these situations. So that's another just mindfulness thing, right? To kind of keep in mind, and really having that perspective of we're all doing our best will bring us back to that. And we're figuring out as we go. We're all humans. None of us know what's going to happen. And there's a little bit of freedom in knowing that. And then there's like the trust and and for centuries, we figured it out, right? For years, we've been going and figuring it out. So no matter what comes up next, we're going to figure it out together. So awareness and ownership, meeting uneasiness with calmness, and grounding into the fact or perspective that we're all doing our best, and remembering this and kind of centering ourselves in this no matter what comes up. Those are the three big things. If you are considering becoming a foster parent and you would like support in not just becoming a foster parent, not just deciding which agency is best for you, because there are options there, but even just deciding is this for me? And is this for me right now? We are here for you. Audra and I have put together the Prospective Parents Program to guide you through this decision-making process in a way that is supportive and mindful for you, So we can hold space for you to make the decision, for you to feel your fears, right? And to figure out what they are, and then to meet you with the information you need to make the best decision for you and your family, if you have one. And that way you can move forward confidently with that feeling of, all right, don't know exactly what I'm getting myself into, but I'm excited and I'm going to figure it out. And I have support around me to help me figure it out. And that's really what the Prospective Parent Program is about. If you would like more from me, my website is erinlindstrom.com. I am on Instagram at Erin Lindstrom, and I talk a lot about mindset stuff, different strategies to just be a human and a being, right? The whole human being thing, and how we can do our best to be mindful and stay in that like being feeling while going through human experiences. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. And a big thank you for listening. Foster Care Aware is all about spreading the word about how we can help the kids who are in care in whatever capacity works for you. Tidewater Friends of Foster Care is here to help support you through the journey. Whether you want to be a foster parent, volunteer, donor, or advocate, head on over to fostercareaware.org/next steps to learn more.